welcome back to another episode of Behind the Scenes. Today we're looking at the music behind Chapter 2 of High Hopes So Rolls.
Whoop whoop.
Rook episode. This series was originally just for our patrons, but thanks to their help we're able to put them on YouTube for everybody to enjoy. So thank you very much to people like Lena, Crystal, Anna and Amberstone16. Your contributions make the world of difference.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate it.
My name is Jenny Budd. I am the Dungeon Master and the writer and the production manager and, whatever shoe needs wearing. And today I'm talking with our composer and our sound engineer, Mr. Oliver Moore. Woo!
Thanks.
Whoop, whoop.
Thanks for the...
Bow, 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 bow.
Are you doing this because I made my own introduction on that one podcast where I made the people cheer for me?
Sure.
The people.
The people.
Hi, yeah. I'm
Actually,
Oliver.
It's because somebody commented on the Chapter 01 that it was unintentional ASMR. So now I'm going to remove that factor entirely with my my fake vuvuzela or air horn noises.
God, they were terrible.
What vuvuzelas?
Vuvuzelas, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they still are.
Yeah, they still are.
They're still a thing.
Yeah, they get a bad rap.
Yeah, well, they only
but
play,
for good reason.
They only play one note and it's brrr.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep, that's true.
Yeah, that's them.
Should we talk about the episode?
Anyway, yeah.
Before we get completely sidetracked.
We hope you all enjoyed High Hopes So Rolls Chapter 2, Rook. We worked really hard on it, didn't we, Oliver?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Did we not?
No, I wasn't. That was a setup for you to say yes with a lot of affirmation and then explain how hard you worked on it.
I got this. Yeah, no, it was really, really hard work. Yep.
See, now I made it sound like you didn't at all.
I put a lot of work into it. I did spend a lot of time painstakingly going through things, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have this episode's gonna have like a sister episode or a spin-off series about the sound effects.
Yeah, that's right. So we're gonna do sound effects as well, because there was a lot of really cool stuff with that. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of creative things that went into it. We experimented with different things, and so yeah, we will definitely be having a separate episode for sound effects sometime very, very soon. But today we're just going to talk about the music. So we originally started off the process the same way we did Paddy's. So I asked Matt for a list of references, things that he associates to Rook, and sort of things that, like musically speaking, or like other things that, he thought might be useful in composing the music, sort of any backstory, any sort of like small details about Rook that I might not know. I didn't receive a list. I got nothing. Absolutely so.
And this wasn't the place to call Matt out like this, but yes, he's pretty disorganized.
Well, I mean, yes and no, because what I did in turn is that I went to his Spotify playlist.
Yes, which is public, which you can listen to. We have a Spotify account, the Shrieking Wizard Co. But also there's links to these playlists kind of everywhere on our Patreon and in other places. All of the active in the show High Hopes So Rolls party members have a Spotify playlist that you can listen to. Mm-hmm. So that's where you started.
So that is where I started, yeah. I went through the whole playlist, and the very, very first track is actually based off of in the episode, in the first track in the episode, I should clarify, I Know Rosa, which is a guitar instrumental when they're all sat in the bar, is based on the very last track in Rook's playlist, which is Blood on My Name, which is by the brothers Bright, and I basically took that track and I used the same sort of chord structure and the same sort of sound of that, and I sort of reimagined it for like acoustic guitar and just sort of tweaked it a little bit, drew it out, and not even Matt noticed until I told him when we were actually sat down to watch the episode. He didn't realize.
Most people would be surprised to learn that the guitar tracks in the feature in the tavern in Rundar that sort of string together Rook, retelling this story, aren't just sort of like random ambience sounds, and not like just like, oh, this is like what I think this intro should sound like. It's actually based specifically on Rook. All of this music is designed around characters in this episode.
Yeah, all of this music is sort of designed around Rook. The original idea for the tavern scenes was that I was going to do, each time we cut away to the tavern, we were going to do a different track from Rook's playlist. I was going to reimagine like a different piece, like, and sort of have like sort of maybe 3-4 different reimaginings of all these pieces. It didn't pan out that way.
It's quite a lot of work.
That's a lot of work, and eventually, obviously, we ended up with something different. But I'm kind of happier with the way I did it. But this was a really, really good starting point, and I think it lends quite nicely to the beginning of the episode.
I also just really like it. It's great. It's really lovely, classical guitar-esque. Like,
there's a wide variety of styles in this episode, and so to kick it off with something that was like fairly straightforward and down the middle, I really appreciated it, to be honest with you, because at that point when I wrote that, because I wrote everything in order, I wasn't 100% sure as to where the music would go, and then the idea of like Rook having a theme came about in my mind, because that's why I really wanted references from Matt, so I could like develop a theme for him. But it never really materialized. Rook doesn't necessarily have a theme. However, the next track, Emeraloth, sort of comes around a number of times in the episode. It's used in different ways, and I'll sort of mention them as we sort of go through the tracks. But that was really the sort of, for me, it sort of became Rook's theme, even though it is, sort of setting up Emeraloth. But you can hear it in loads of different places as well. But that features a duduk, and a bansuri. If you haven't seen a duduk, by the way, you should definitely Google duduk. Dukuk. They're fascinating. They literally look like a duck's bill, but much, much wider. They're fascinating instruments. I love them. And the bansuri comes from India, and the duduk comes from ancient Armenia, and they're both really, really interesting instruments. You hear the duduk a lot in sort of like Egyptian sort of styled music. Yeah, so I took these sort of two instruments and I really went with it, because I wanted this sort of otherworldly kind of vibe. I didn't want it to be rooted in from Paddy's episode. I wanted it to be completely separate, and so I made every effort to to make that change. And Emeraloth really sets up, the motif for Rook. You hear it sort of throughout the episode. We then go to the lab. And the lab was really where I sort of started to have fun, because in the lab, you've got all the labby stuff going on. And I had to make a decision then as to what magic would sound like, or at least start to think about what the magical world would sound like. And I fell on synths, for whatever reason.
Because they're cool.
Synths are cool, and it just sort of felt right. It fit very, very nicely. So that very opening for the lab sequence, I wrote, because I wanted it to sound like, sort of machines and all this kind of stuff. It's synthy, it's technical, it's
interesting because in a conversation I had with Matt recently in a speed paint of Rook Lunera, which you can find on our channel.
Yes, yeah, I know what you talked about. I know what you're about to say. Yeah,
we talked about how arcane magic in Arcadon is much more of it. Well, me and Matt always approach arcane magic as science.
Yes,
and that it's more of a programming language than it is, say, for example, painting. Like how paladins and clerics, they can paint with their charisma because it's the conviction of their belief, but wizards must build the spells themselves. They must, build the programming language with which to alter the world. So the sound of magic being like technical and synthy really makes sense to me, because it's the same idea. It's as close to science fiction as fantasy can step. Yeah.
and what's even more interesting is that I made that conscious decision without knowing this context. So yeah, that sort of beginning bit all the way up to when we have the lab explosion. Actually, there is some brass and woodwind swells in there, but really it's a happy accident. They lend themselves to be quite sort of synthy sounding anyway, so they sort of work the way in, and it just all blends really, really nicely. And then obviously past the explosion, we have them exiting the lab and finding their parents after the battle, and that really, that is the biggest callback to the Mariloth theme, but it's far more orchestrated. There's more strings. You've still got the duduk and the bansuri in there, right, to sort of pull you back to the original idea, but it's just more fleshed out. It's more of an idea, just sort of bringing more worlds together, basically, because I didn't want the whole thing to be synth. It's a very sort of mix of different styles.
I think it's important because a large part of what Rook associates with, I mean, I'm speaking on his behalf here, so don't quote me on this, but I think a large part of what Rook associates with Mariloth, with his home, is this unsurmountable amount of grief, the loss of his sister and his dead parents. And spoilers for chapter 2. If you're listening to this, why haven't you watched that?
Haven't you watched chapter 2? Yeah.
So it's I think really really good use of thematic music for the city appears in these big moments
of Rook's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the city was his life, wasn't it?
Exactly.
He's
quite young there, by the way. I think his parents died when he's 18.
Wow, yeah, no, he is young.
He's
How
very
old's Jay?
young. She's 16.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it sucks.
Miserable. Really miserable.
It's bad.
So we then move on past the under the city, and we go to their hideout, where Rook sees the goon. And again, more synth. I wanted to build up the tension when he goes to the hideout, and you don't know who's there with him. I didn't want to give anything away in the music. I just wanted it to be sort of like this sort of confusion, and so I just again used sort of synth sounds, and it's sort of very much like a question, like a constant question, and then as soon as we see the goon, we have that sort of really deep bassy synth that comes through.
This is what I would like to refer to as the Winter Soldier effect.
Yes. You specifically said that you wanted a Winter Soldier esque scream to sort of follow Rook around every time we see the goons. And we did try a sort of a scream.
Yeah, it doesn't quite. Well, I mean,
it didn't quite line up, did it?
We couldn't quite get it to work, I think. Rather.
Yeah.
So obviously, that means the Winter Soldier soundtrack is like a masterpiece,
yes,
right?
It's great, yeah.
But also, like for us, sort of drawing on that as inspiration, like we have that like screeching, like that. It's almost like a horror sound, right? When we don't know who the Winter Soldier is, he's just this enemy that just keeps coming. It just keeps appearing. Yeah. Always wins. Always gets what he wants.
I really actually quite like that
funky metal
noise. I think in my track listings, for every track that you hear that wah noise, I think I literally, the title of that track is literally BWAAAAOOOOO.
Oh, wow.
I'm such a good composer. But it really did become part of the music. I was really keen to make sure it wasn't a sound effect.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be in the music. And then obviously as you hear the goon, sort of rustle around his hideout, and you transition from night through into day, you hear again the duduk just constantly trying to pull you back to his home, that sort of home idea of a Mariloth. There is actually a first draft for the hideout, which is sort of just as mysterious. But let's listen to that now. That's the music that leads up to where the goon enters, rather than it being like after the goon. I don't have any sort of like initial ideas for that.
I really, really like that.
Oh, you do?
I really like that.
Oh,
That's
damn.
it doesn't fit.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't fit, but I do really, really like that. That's much more Blade Runner-esque than would fit in the show, but I love it. It's got that big tears in rain energy.
I did draw a little bit from Blade Runner in certain places, just because I like that music, and that's sort of what I like to draw from. So that was that sort of initial idea, and then obviously instead it turned into so quite different from the original idea. It just evolved in a way, because as you say, the initial idea didn't quite fit to what was being shown. But I think what came out was really nice in the end. Conveyed the scene as it needed to be.
I would say still super Blade Runner.
Oh yeah,
super Blade Runner. The original Blade Runner soundtrack is composed by, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this right, Vangelis. Features a lot of South Asian, Middle Eastern sounds and instruments and music, and dang, first of all, if you ever watched Blade Runner, go do that. So do yourself that favour, and then listen to the soundtrack. It's really, really good. Big mood. It's as close to Blade Runner as and that sort of speculative science fiction that we're going to get
to. Yeah. I don't think we want to go too much closer to it. Got to be careful.
But dang, I'm real glad we went there.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed doing the music for this one. We then cut away back to the bar. So as again, like I say, originally I was going to do them all as different reimaginings of Rook's playlist, and then they sort of evolved into be reflections of the scenes that we had seen moments before. The track J did actually have a rough version before it. It's not very good, but here it is.
A bit more cowboy.
A little bit more cowboy, yeah.
A little bit more yeehaw.
Yeah, exactly,
like,
right?
Howdy, partner.
Like you're in a saloon in the Wild West, as opposed
What's
to
doing in these parts. Yeah.
And it just didn't fit. I'm not a guitarist. I should preface that I'm not a guitarist. I can strum chords. I know my chords on a guitar, but I don't think I could actually play a guitar, like melodies and stuff on a guitar, and really do it justice. So yeah, I had to be quite careful, I think, when composing the guitar tracks. But basically I just wanted them all, like I say, to be reflective of what we've just seen, and to just sit in the background. You're in a tavern, someone is there playing, they're noodling, they're doing whatever it is that they do, and it was just meant to be there. I wanted them all to be quite consistent as well, so you knew that was the idea. Every time we sort of go back to the bar, that happens. So next we meet Sareth, and
this is, I think, my favorite track.
This was a joy to write. I really enjoyed writing the music for Sareth. What was very fortunate for me is that I know the person voicing Sareth.
So Sareth is played by our good friend Adam Hoskins, who is himself a musician.
Yes.
He is also a pops conductor and a singer and all-round very talented man. So here's this is a little tangential, but it kind of works. And I chose Adam to be Sareth because of my previous D&D experience with him, where he has played similar wizards to Sareth, the funky grandpa.
That's right. Yeah. We were in the campaign together, weren't we? Yeah.
Adam has a lot of energy, and he certainly brings a lot of big funky grandpa energy to Sareth, for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Perfect.
And so I feel like for you, it's easy to compose for Sareth because you can compose for Adam.
Yes, that's right. Well, I mean, so Adam plays the bassoon, and on occasion when he can, he'll play the contrabassoon as well. If you don't know what a contrabassoon is, imagine a huge bassoon. Yeah, it's so if you think of a bassoon,
unit of a bassoon.
Yeah, Google it. If you think of a bassoon being sort of low, a contrabassoon really is a throaty kind of low sound, and I wouldn't have had that track be any other way. A lot of the music before Sareth's track is very serious. It's very moody. And I really wanted something to lift the mood a little bit at this point in the story. We're not quite halfway, but you just need something to sort of go, hey, look, things are all right, you know?
It's really funny to me how the six of us at Wizards and then you, Olie, the seventh, all have independently done something to Sareth that we've all gotten to him in the story and then been like, right, let's change tack with him, right? He's a left turn away from this path that we're on.
Yeah.
So, for example, you know, you're saying, well, we get to him and we're like, okay, we're changing direction. We're going contrabassoon. We're making it weird. Okay, we're going funky grandpa. When Amy gets to him to colour him, she's like, okay,
colours.
Sunset mode, engage. Yeah.
It's interesting the cumulative effort to turn Sareth into who he became, and none of it was wrong. It all just blended and just went bam. This is Sareth now.
It's always been who he is. It's been fascinating to see, you know, everybody take their understanding of that and make him who he is. So obviously a large part of that is this piece of music.
That's right. I actually took inspiration for this track in particular from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone soundtrack, Sorcerer's Stone if you're in America. There's a scene in that film where Hagrid hatches his dragon, the Norwegian Ridgeback, and he calls him Norbert. It's very sweet. I do suggest you go and listen to that track because you'll immediately hear my influence for that. There is actually a sort of beta version of Sareth's track, which is just on a one bassoon line, but you can definitely hear how it changed to be something slightly different, but very, very much the same sort of style. So it has that same energy, but as I was playing that's literally as I played it into the keyboard.
Sort of, it's both. It's a little bit discordant, which I quite like.
Well, the final track is discordant as well.
I wonder if I can say that Sareth is a man who bears ADHD quite well.
Yeah.
He's also the kind of man who walks on the balls of his feet.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like that springy, sort of like 100% it really fits him.
It does, yeah, and obviously I just tweaked that. You could hear the theme sort of forming a little bit more in my head as the more that goes on.
As you were going there,
Yeah, and then eventually I was like, that's it. It just sits. There was no variation for that. It's always been that, because I knew exactly what I wanted from that, and that's just how I wanted to put him into this world. And then that sort of leads us into the tower, and the tower is just Sarah's theme, but drawn out in a synth.
Yeah, because we're back to talking not about a person, but about magic. Okay, that might be my favourite.
So, I mean, for me, Sareth's Tower was an extension of Sareth.
100%.
And not only that, but the tower, for me, also had to be a character. And so using Sareth's theme to convey the tower worked really nicely. Changing the instrumentation, adding a little bit, tweaking it a bit here and there, and making it something a little bit more mystical rather than playful. Yeah, I love that. It sets the tone for that scene. And then obviously we have that lovely interjection, that almost like butting in of the harp as Rosa arrives.
Yeah, that callback to Errand Boy.
The callback to Errand Boy, to really sort of make sure you're aware that everything really is as connected as it possibly can be. Having that harp there really just sort of made you go, oh yeah, that's a character I have seen before. Very, very keen to link everything together where I can.
I really love it. I think it works really well. I think it's Rook remembering, so it's sort of very, very reminiscent. Like it almost pulls you into his memory of the place, right?
Yep.
And of course, the tower and Sareth are inherently linked in Rook's mind. Like, he is safe in the tower, but he's safe in Sareth's presence.
Yes.
And also he's remembering Rosa as they were when they were in their early 20s with Sareth.
Young love.
This like weird like little family group that he's found himself, right?
Yeah.
Very nice. For me, it's also Rosa and Sareth's relationship.
Yes.
You know, like the complexities of magic and all that kind of stuff, you know, like it's as ponderous as the father figure that Sareth is to them. It's very beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, no, I don't think I would have had it any other way. And then we move from the tower through into the sort of the learning sequence with the track named Complexities of Magic, which again goes back to the Ameriloth theme. It is a drawn out version of Ameriloth using those synths, and in my head it's an evolved form of the Ameriloth theme. So rather than sort of going from a very sort of rounded and earthy kind of sound and back in Ameriloth, we move into the same idea but in synths and magic. And for me, it shows Rook's progression and his learning, you know, in the world of magic. So it's the same sort of rooted home sound, but in a different way.
So this track is named for
the
line that
the
Sarah
line,
says,
yes,
the complexities of magic. I would just like to interject here that the only scripted lines that Sarah has in this episode are,
I doubt Shaklunera raised you to pickpockets, boy. At least not this poorly. I need someone to carry my books for me anyway.
Yeah, that's it. Every other line that you hear from Sarah is completely ad hoc.
Adam riffed those based on the storyboards on his own, straight out of his head in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Man's a genius.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. I wouldn't have it any other way. And like, it was the perfect title for this track as well.
I think we're going to make a video, I don't know who'll hold me to this, but we're going to make a video exploring Sarath himself in more detail
Yes.
at a later date anyway. So we'll play you all of the stuff that Adam sent us and a bunch of other stuff as well.
Yeah. So you'll hear all of his lines, because not all of them
Not everything
were
made
used.
it in, yeah.
But yeah, no, I really like that. The complexities of magic really is a evolving stepping stone for Rook. Then we come to Intruders, and the beginning of Intruders is like, for me, it's a callback to the Tower tune, but it's like the Tower is sick. It's like it's unwell, like it's thinking about a coming storm or something like that, and that is just to reflect Sarath's mood. It's like the two are connected. And that one really does have a very sort of Blade Runner-esque kind of sound if you listen. Like, the notes don't quite fall the way you would expect them to. It isn't the Tower, you know. It's trying to be, but the Tower there's something wrong. There's something, a sense of foreboding about it. But you can clearly hear the Blade Runner influence is there. But I really, really like a lot of these tracks, to be honest with you. But that one really does sort of, it's nice, you know. And then we hit the same wah noise as we have done in previous tracks, and the goons return. I've never written anything like that before in my entire life. Ever. Can you tell?
Well, no, I think you did it very successfully. It's very anxiety inducing, that entire build up. I mean, I have known what's coming for well over 4 years at this point. And still, every time we sat down to do passes of the music or the frames or whatever we were doing with this music in it, it made me anxious.
I mean, it's really good to know, you know, like, I wanted that build up. I wanted the whole thing to be synth. I didn't want any real instruments in there at all, because this is like the sort of the peak of the episode. You could argue that Faberson probably is the peak, but for me, this really was it. And so I wanted to go all out on the synth as much as I could, and the sounds that you hear are representative of the fight that's happening, you know, the way the magic is flying around. There's a lot of components going on. There's a lot of sound happening. It was always meant to be something that would sit under more sound effects, more sound. There was just so much going on. It was almost meant to be like you were confused when you hit the main fight sequence. You know, I wanted to sort of chuck everything at your senses as I possibly could without it sort of losing its musicality. I'm really thrilled with how it turned out. Again, never done anything like it before. I don't really know what my inspiration for it really was. I can't quite pinpoint it, but I knew I just wanted something different. I wanted to experiment. This really sort of was my experimental album, right? If we're going to look at it like that, this is my experimental phase.
So for me, it does a couple of really key things.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that at this point we have associated the quote unquote Winter Soldier noise with the goon's appearance, right?
Yes.
So we get the wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And so for me, and for I imagine most of the audience, that triggers the oh no.
Oh no noise, yeah.
Oh no, something's bad is about to happen. And then in there you've layered in the bum bum.
Yeah,
right? Like that almost
that was
like
a very late
heartbeat-esque.
Yeah, that was a very late addition. There's a boom boom. Right.
That really does that, because that's Rook. Like you can almost feel like his heart in his chest, like thundering as he runs up the stairs, because he has experienced this before, like us, right? Like he has been through this before. He knows he has things to be afraid of.
Yes.
And then we have the beat of the fight, bum 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 bum, right? Like that really fast paced. Like there's kind of no time to think about what's happening here. It's just happening.
Alex was really thrown off when he heard it because he was like, "Oh, that's not what I."
Oh yeah.
That really threw off the pacing for me in my head as to how the fight was going to go. I was like, "I'm not even sorry. I'm not changing it."
That's really interesting to me. So the way that we do this is that we make a storyboard, and then we make a video of the storyboard, so that whilst we're working on frames, Olie has some frame of reference with which to compose to.
Strictly speaking, we should normally in a film setting, you'd probably have like more of a rough draft of the film.
Yeah.
Without sound, ready to go, cut together.
Yes. The music would be the very last thing that happens.
You normally sort of start doing that more towards the end as the film was sort of being edited and color graded and all that kind of stuff. But we just don't have the luxury of that, do we?
No, the timeline of that is just too luxurious. We don't have that. So it's really interesting to me that Alex should say, "Oh wow, that's not what that sounded like. That's not what the beat of this sounded like to me." Because to me, having watched the storyboards, that is exactly the beat of the fight. I did not think that. I thought you had matched the movement pretty well.
Yeah.
Because we had a rough of the frame by frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the storyboard for that was actually pretty close. There was a perspective change, I think, but otherwise there wasn't too much different about it. I think that sequence stayed static all the way through production.
I would be interested to see a version that fit what Alex had in his head.
Yeah, well, I mean, he does use MIDI sequences online, so maybe he could draw one up for you. Yeah, I'd be very curious as well if he could, like, you know, take his idea out of his head and sort of convey it. It would be fascinating. Music is so subjective.
So subjective.
Yeah, you know, you can really have. I mean, because if anyone else had been composing it, they probably would have had completely different sound to what I came out with. And then we come on to Sarah's passing, so we didn't make it up the stairs in time. I think I seem to recall like grappling with this a little bit. I couldn't quite figure out how I wanted to transition from such a heavy track of the fight sequence into something that should have been very, very reflective and mournful. I just couldn't suss it at all. But there are two ideas that I had, both of which I do like, but they, next to the scene that you know we come from, didn't sit right for me. But here's the first one. Bit sort of church organ, like, you know, like it's almost like a lament, and it fit in with the. I sort of did that because it fit in with the synth. I do quite like that idea. I just don't think it was quite appropriate for the scene. It worked very, very well for the scene immediately after seeing Sareth and going into that, where we see all the ghosts of Rook's past.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would have worked beautifully for that. Not so much for Sareth's passing scene.
It has a slightly different vibe to it that I can't quite put my finger on.
It does, yeah. And then the next one, I think this one I actually wrote in a different project. So I was working on a different track entirely and messing around with synths, and I found this sound, and I was like, "Ooh, this could be really cool for later in the episode," and I put it to that point in particular.
Okay, so I know that there are other synth tracks and albums and soundtracks out there in the world, but
Yes.
again, very Blade Runner.
Very Blade Runner. Oh yes. Oh yeah. Lots of Blade Runner influence.
Like, so like this is gonna sound weird, but one of the reasons I really like Blade Runner is because it makes me cry.
Yeah. It makes me feel.
It makes me sad. And yeah, I like that. But it doesn't quite fit. Like, bearing in mind the conversations we've been having about magic and Sareth and all of that, like, really the passing of Sareth dying is kind of like the magic dies.
Yes.
The tower is dead.
Yeah.
So it doesn't quite fit anymore.
No, it doesn't. And it didn't sit right with me either. I like both of them.
It's also quite big and climatic, but we're not there yet. We're not at the end of the episode yet.
No, we're not. So instead what I opted for was to use Sareth's theme and make it a little bit more sort of somber. But then of course we move away from that scene into that passage where we see the ghosts of Rook's past. And I really wanted to make it more vengeful, more sort of, like anger. You go from upset and hurt into all of a sudden need to hurt someone, right? Someone needs to be punished for this. And so you transition from Sareth's theme straight into like an angry version of a Mariloth, which again reflects Rook and how Rook is feeling. You go from sadness, Sareth, really close to him, into anger. So I changed the instrumentation, turned it sort of, more back into woodwind and bassoon, and brought all of the natural instruments back, and then added a little bit of synth. And again, I have this a real obsession with organ music. I love organ music. I think it's great. And I really did want to try and convey that towards the end of that track, and I think all the instruments laid over each other like that really works nicely. It does sound like someone has just sort of taken all the keys on the keyboard and just gone boom, and really made you feel it inside a massive church.
Yeah, and that sort of connotes the mourning.
That's right. Yeah,
it's interesting that you would say this is like, obviously because of what we're seeing on screen, that this is angry Mariloth, right?
Yeah, well, or like rage, that sort of
100%. I agree with you. Because at this point, Drake is Mariloth, right? Drake is not whole. He has the island now. Like Sareth's death is unfortunately one of many, right? Whilst he picks off his enemies, or people who would stand against him. So now in Rook's mind, at this point in time, both the city that he is from, his home, and the thing that he hates the most in the world, the thing that is destroying his home and his friends and his
Are the
family,
same
are
thing.
the same thing.
Cool.
This is also the point where, I mean, I know this story is about Rook, but it's also slightly about Rosa at this point. This is the point where Sarah dies, and Rook starts to become entwined in his revenge. This is the point where Rosa kind of loses a handle on her anger management. Like, people don't really know this about her because we haven't really talked about her very much, but she defaults to anger pretty quickly. And so, obviously this is a massive trauma. Rook's thinking back on, he's kind of pensive about it because that's the person that he is. He thinks about it a lot. She doesn't have that process, really. I mean, when she thinks about Sarah dying or about Sarah at all, she just gets angry really, really quickly.
Yeah.
When she thinks about Mariloff, she gets angry.
Yeah, and like the instrumentation I used in it actually is the first time you hear any version of a Mariloff theme without including any of Rook's instruments.
Yeah.
I think there might be duduk in there actually, but it's nowhere near as prominent as it has been in the past. They are either goon based or Sareth based, so contrabassoon, you've got the bois in there, like it's not about Rook anymore, it's about a wider thing. He's not the center.
Welcome in Mariloff anymore.
Yeah, sort of drawing him away from his home. And then we come to Faberston. Oh boy.
You really like this track.
Do I like Faberston? I'm so happy with Faberston.
It's kind of funny to me because, like, I mean, obviously the events there are pretty big, but in terms of the timeline of things that has happened to Rook, it's almost nothing.
No, I know it is.
At this point.
I love it. I don't care. I love it. So the way the music comes in, I really want it to be a jump scare. Like, you just have the soundscape of Faberston, the rain, and then as soon as his face hits that puddle, bam! Sound! Noise! Everything about this track just screams noise. It's still musical, but it is noise. For those of you who don't know, I'm a trumpet player. I know the brass world quite well. And this episode hadn't featured nearly any brass, and I was horribly upset by this fact. So I set about...
You slammed it in there.
I set about rectifying this immediately by... And there are no other instruments. That every instrument is a brass instrument. I think there are maybe 4 to 5 different horn tracks. There are 3 trumpet tracks. There are 2 tubas, 2 trombone sections. It's just unadulterated brass, everybody, and I couldn't be happier. I love the idea of there being like this enormous sort of like shock. Oh my god, why is Rook in a puddle? Who's caught him? Where is he? Why is a building on fire? Right? You have this initial shock of taking in your surroundings as he gets pulled up by the hair. And then we have Grimethorpe, voiced by me. For those of you who didn't know, I voiced Grimethorpe. Being a complete bastard, by the way. And having that lovely sort of, that swelling motion of the sound, right? Trying to sort of draw back that synth a little bit, but it's still being natural instruments. Building up that tension right the way through to when the dragon crashes down onto one of the buildings, and then just going almost all out for it, with this noise. Once again, ending on this beautiful crunchy chord that just sort of lingers. Every time I hear it, I wrote it. Every time I hear it, like it just makes me feel good. It's a good noise.
It's interesting that you should use the word crunchy to describe that chord because
It is. No, it is. If you were to look at the chord itself, there are clashing notes everywhere, but they are structured in such a way that it comes out as something.
We'll talk about this a little bit more in the sound effects episode, but like Faberston, every pass of Faberston you would send us, I'd be like, crunchy, make the buildings crunchier.
Yeah, you really wanted crunchy
make
buildings.
it crunchy.
It's actually, I mean, like you wanted the crunchy buildings in Faberston, and Amy wanted a really crunchy wall when Rook hits it in the tower.
Yeah.
You're all about
crunchy.
crunch.
So it's interesting that like the music is also crunchy.
I wanted it like someone had just taken their arm and gone bam on an organ keyboard. Like, fuck this noise, right? Oh, that's what I wanted, and I think that's exactly what I got.
I think you achieved that pretty well.
I wouldn't change that track for the world. I love it. It is my favorite. I like all the tracks in this album, but Faberston really does hit me hard, which is great. And then we come to the very end. So the Bitter Storm.
Yep.
Which is just a repurposed High Hopes theme. For all intents and purposes. There's a bit of the old Bark to Carter in there, just a little bit for any of those who sort of, just a smidge, just a little influence. And originally this track did actually feature a duduk as well, as sort of like these two instruments sort of talking to each other, which I do have. I'll play it for you in a second. But I decided that it didn't really lend itself to the mood of the scene. And so I just elected to remove it completely. It isn't like a finalized thing. I was just sort of messing about with it, sort of like being that sort of second voice that tries to sort of draw everything together. But it just didn't work. Sounds like this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to be
Too technical.
too clever for my own good. Yeah, and you know what? Like the best bit of advice I think I can give to people who are composing, if you're just starting out with composition or anything like that, don't overcomplicate everything. Not everything that you write has to have every single instrument in it. Not everything you write has to have a counter melody. Not everything you write has to be counter to itself or have a TS to Picardy or anything. It doesn't have to have a complex time signature. Sometimes the best music you can write is in 4/4 in C major. Not that piece is in 4/4 C major. I think it's actually A minor, but that's not the point. I can't quite remember. But just keep things simple, because that track sounds 10 times better without that addition of a duduk.
Done is better than perfect, right? So it's better to have a solid, simple thing than an unfinished, complicated bastard.
Yeah. Just don't muddy the waters. Sometimes, actually, even when you're composing something, take things out. Even if you think this is a finished track, remove something from the situation, and you will suddenly find that it just lightens everything that you've done, or makes something else clearer. Sometimes removing things is actually the way forward.
Yeah, I would apply this. I would say this is a principle that's true of all kinds of making.
Yeah.
If you there's this old story of being a prop maker, and I don't know what color this like sci-fi alien gun. I don't know how to paint this. I can't seem to get it work. So what I will do is I will just paint it red and white candy cane stripes. Obviously 100% wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But now that it is those colors, now that it is completely different, I can now see
that it's wrong.
How I need to do it right.
Yeah.
I now know what it needs.
And I would argue that, in the process for me doing the music for this chapter, and chapter 1 as well, I'm still learning a lot about this. There are things that I feel as though I could definitely improve on, and I learn every single time I sit down to write something. Music isn't there is a rule book. I should strictly say there is a rule book, but you learn the rules and then you can throw the rule book out.
Yeah, well, that's true of everything. You must know you must know the rules before you can break them properly. 100%. Right, you must understand anatomy before you can make it goofy.
Yeah.
Going back to the track.
Yes.
It's interesting to me that I'm going to read into it a little bit. I'm going to give it meaning that you did not intend.
Okay.
That you started with the High Hopes theme and an instrument that we now associate with Rook speaking to each other.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
No.
So you took out the instrument that was Rook and you just had the High Hopes theme, and that is because he is no longer that single lonely man walking away from the only other person on the road.
While looking into this.
He is now a member of High Hopes Slow Rolls. And so those two things don't work together because that's not how it is anymore. He's not Valdesar and High Hopes. He is just a member of High Hopes. And I'm going to say that's why it doesn't work.
Okay, let's go with that.
Because the music knew.
The music knew. That's it. I would roll the credits, but there's not much to say about the credits.
Except that I really like them.
You do?
Yeah, I think you think it's very cheesy.
Yeah,
I think
always, every time. Yep.
I think it's a masterstroke, personally. So we're always walking that fine line between your anime stereotypes and Western animation or whatever. But I think it lends it that sort of, I don't know,
the air of
I'm
something.
Just waving my
it
arms
ties
in
it.
the air.
What you think it ties it all together? Like
Yeah.
it sort of brings the episode to a close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did that because I threw it together because I didn't want to use the same piano track that we had used in the last 2 episodes. Mainly because I threw that one together also pretty quickly. I just took the Amarylov theme and I tweaked it for piano. There wasn't too
It's
much.
lovely. I do really like it.
Yeah, it feels very anime-esque.
You think it's very naff.
I do. It's not that it's bad. I wouldn't say that at all. But it's not my favorite.
So that's the music for chapter 2.
That is the music for chapter 2.
Of
Yes.
High Hopes So Rolls. You can listen to it pretty much everywhere.
You can listen to it. So it's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. It's available in the iTunes store if you wish to purchase it.
On Amazon Music.
It's on Amazon Music. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's also on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Shrieking Wizard.
Yes.
That might not be the case, but we're the Shrieking Wizard Co. You can find us by typing that into YouTube, and you can find the soundtrack by typing that in.
You can find the soundtrack.
You're listening to this on our channel.
Yeah. So you can find the album. If you type in Oliver Moore, I found that's actually the quickest way because there are other things that get in the way of High Hopes.
Yeah.
But the album itself is called High Hopes, The Sounds of Arcaden, Chapter 2. And, listen to it on repeat. Do what you do.
If you're looking for a way to support the production of High Hopes Their Rolls, then frankly just listening to the music on Spotify or your streaming platform of choice is a very, very good way to do that. Mm-hmm. Or you can share it with your friends.
Please do.
Pick 2 people that you think like some funky beats and share it with them.
Funky beats. Music isn't funk.
That really upset you, didn't it?
Yes.
You can find Oliver on
Twitter
Mercury
at Mercury Music 42
and on Instagram at
Mercury Olie. Olie is spelled with one L, not two. And then you can also go to my Olie, or you can go to my SoundCloud, which is Mercury Music 4. Ooh. And like I say, if you type in Oliver Moore on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon, I come up pretty quickly, and that will also have Sounds of Arcaden Chapter 1 as well, so you can go back and listen to the previous episode if you would like to as well. But thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you, Jenny, for being here.
I just did you a Google. If you Google Oliver Moore Music, then your website turns up. So
neat. All the stuff is
to
actually
do
on my
that.
website as well. Links to that and whatnot. So you can do that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do it. I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to writing chapter 3.
Thank you very much for listening to this. If you're interested, if you have enjoyed this, then please leave us a like. Consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or to our Patreon if you would like. No, our Patreon. I am never going to get those two the right way around. If you subscribe to our Patreon for as little as $2 a month, then you get early access to stuff, things. If
You're selling it really well.
You get to do polls and things. We very much appreciate you, and we put loads of stuff everywhere. If you have any questions for Oliver or for me or about the music or about anything you've heard in this episode, then please leave us a comment.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah, thanks very much.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.